phone, and he was hearing me, watching me on the phone, and it was an emotional phone call, and I started crying, being upset with whatever happened, and then he left the room, and finally the phone call ended. I went out in the living room, and he was there, 4 years old, trying to sweep the living room floor. And I said, "Oh, Christopher, how sweet, you're sweeping the floor." And he said, "I thought it might make you feel better." And to me, it was compassion. And it was a desperation, I think, for a mother. I don't understand what she's talking about. I don't know why she's upset, but I want to do something. I need to do something to make her feel better. He grabs the broom, and with hope that would work. I think that, if he hadn't been able to do something, it would have been more painful for him. I think that when we can't respond to those messages of our compassion, it does become painful. It's like Jesus with healing the woman who was hemorrhaging. He certainly had the compassion for her pain. But I think because, he says your faith has healed you, he also had compassion for that faith and the pain that could be felt if there wasn't a fulfillment or an affirmation of that faith. So when there's nothing to grasp, I think, when we see things that cause us pain, and in compassion, if we understand it at the root of our faith, that it is something in us that moves, that wants us to respond to the suffering. Not just that we feel it, not just that we see it, but that we want to respond. That it does become difficult if there isn't something to be able to do. And in the work that Rod and I are involved in at Inner City, I see compassion all the time. I see compassion very much within the poor, for the poor, and it's inspiring. I think of a little boy this past summer. He had won a black hat at our festival, and he lost it on the playground. And when we had and it was late at night, so he couldn't find it. And when we had the center the next day, another little boy had a black hat. We had a lot of black hats we gave away at the festival. And so this little boy had worn his black hat, but it fell off his hat and was on the playground floor. And Mark thinks it's his. So they're arguing whose hat it is. And Mark really wants his hat that he thinks he lost at the festival. But Mark kind of got quiet in the argument, and finally he said, it wasn't a sudden discovery, but finally he said, he's 8 years old. He's 8 years old. He says, "I'm going to make this better. I'm going to make it better. You can have the hat." And then he cried. Because he wanted the hat. But, it's that, he has been in a family that has lived the acting out of compassion. And he knew what to do. And so I think it's important for us to learn lessons from everyone around us as we see acts of compassion. There are many of you here that have taught me compassion by your own acts. And I think, being alert to the suffering around us is terribly important. I think that with compassion, it comes to us, I think, because we are connected. We are connected some way to one another. When we see somebody else's suffering, we see our own. We can put ourselves in that person's place. And we don't want them to feel the way we know we would feel if we were there. And I think it's that connectedness to other people because of recognizing suffering is also a sign that the lack of the connectedness is sometimes, I think, what causes some very striking negative behavior among people. They don't feel, why do some people not feel the compassion? Why do they feel stone cold? I think it's because they lack the connectedness. And I think over the years, I've also understood better whether it's a movie like Avatar, or many things that happened before Avatar came along, to remind us that we are connected not just to one another, but we're connected to the grass that grows. So it's what makes me, feel bad when I see the root of a tree caught inside of a chain link fence. It's what makes me feel bad when somebody says, that tree is in the way, we gotta get rid of it. It's what makes me feel happy when it rains, not because I wanted the rain, because I think the trees are happy, and being in touch with them. That connectedness and that urge and that desperateness to want to respond, I don't know what that is, is what plays well on us with these advertisements, on TV or in a magazine. If they show you the picture of a suffering child, torn clothes, dirty face, we don't want that child to have dirty clothes. We don't want them to have a dirty face, but we want them to eat. And they're asking for our money. But this child lives in, Uganda or someplace we're never going to get to help them. So what do we do? So we'll give money. And it's a good ad in the sense because it does play to that compassion. We're desperate. We want to do something. We want to stop the suffering. And I think it's just important to, kind of get that in perspective, but then also realize the little ways that we may contribute to that suffering. I think it's what brought Rod and I to be involved in the inner city and deal with emergency food and clothing, to be involved with helping to get Haven for Hope started, to march in the streets against war, because the children or the soldiers or the parents who are dying in Afghanistan, we are connected to as well. The people in Iran or Syria, the people from Sandy Hook, the people from the storms, we're connected to them. And it's the reason that within our Catholic faith, within our Christian faith, within our different faiths, we know that God's love does not have borders. But we do as people, right? But as people called to faith, we need to break through those borders, whether it's the border between us and Mexico that keeps us from treating people not equal to ourselves, or if it's literally a wall that says, no, we're not going to let you try to come over here and get the bare necessities you need to live. Or whether it's those mental walls that make us think that people in another country are not as good as us, and it's okay if we kill them with our bombs or whatever. So that important connectedness, I think, we are called to through our faith. And I think that it's important also to get ourselves close to people who suffer. We must be with people who suffer. If we're going to take care of the problems of the world, we need to position ourselves. Asking, where do we live? Or if we live someplace where there's not much suffering, how do we get connected to it? How do we physically get connected to it? So I just end with a calling for all of us to make sure that somehow we're connected with those who suffer, so that our compassion that we all have gets really good exercise.